reason. Yeah, I forgot to record these sessions so many times. I have to set an alarm now to have Siri tell me when to do it. Yeah, so yeah, the Canadians build these extraordinary warehouses, and at 40 degrees, around 42 or something, I can't remember exactly the temperature, somewhere between 42 and 44 degrees. Bees use the least amount of stores. They don't have to, you know, that's the exact sweet spot. If we had a climate where it stayed 42 degrees all winter, we'd have very little death in our colonies, but we don't. Of course, we have to deal with the extremes of temperature. So anyway, so yeah, so the jury's out on colonies, and if you find something that works for you, Mike, if you want to try that, let us know. I mean, John, let us know, and then and I know they work in Connecticut because I know Mark Surzak uses them like crazy all over the place.
All right, thank you, Bill. All
right. It takes me 15 minutes to answer any kind of a question these days. Let's get started with Bee Talks. So welcome to Bee Talks. I'm Bill Hesbach. I'm the president of the Connecticut Beekeepers Association. We have on here also two other board members that I see right now. Jose Zielinski. Hello. All right, so we're gonna have to ask you to put your mics on mute. All right, so we don't hear that background talk. Jose Zielinski is on. He's the vice president of the Connecticut Beekeepers Association. He just turned his light on so you can see him. That's great. And then we have, where's Paul? I thought I saw Paul. There he is. Paul Zielinski is
here.
Yep, there he is. He's our member at large. You are welcome to use Paul as your conduit into any kind of a board issue that you have. You know, that's the member at large's actual duty, is to be the representative on the board for the members. Of course, we're all advocates for the members, all of us, but that's Paul's specialty. He's also our new bee yard manager. So he's in charge of trying to keep those bees alive. He's doing a great job of that. He also is, I'm sure Paul's looking for volunteers we'll be looking for volunteers when the grass starts to grow. Is that right, Paul? Or people to come and help you do something?
Love to have volunteers.
Yeah, so if any of you want to get involved in a bee yard in a working way, meaning you're going there to do some work.
Right, yeah.
You know, and learn
some beer, we can join it.
What's that?
We can bring some beer and then sit down and watch the bees.
Yeah, you can do that, I guess. Yeah, I don't know if they would. I don't know if the Massaro Community Farm would allow you to drink on their property. But you might
just within the apiary.
Okay, you could try that. I guess, you know, you'd probably get arrested, but try it. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, Paul just put up his message so that if you want to contact him, send him some email there. But yeah, we're always looking for help in the bee yard during the year. There's lots of things to do. We have to feed bees. We have to clean out bottom boards. There's lots of things to do. Paul and I did a fair amount of work to clean up the yard last year. Would you consider that true, Paul?
We did.
Yeah.
Yes.
So now we have 5 packages coming. We have our first demonstration on the 26th. Is that right, Paul?
Right.
We're going to be. Now the bees are supposed to arrive when? The 23rd or 4th or something?
They're supposed to arrive on the 23rd. If all goes well.
If all goes well, that'll be dependent on Michael. Are you going to help with bringing those bees up this year, Michael Lund?
No, I usually don't do the Georgia trip. I end up going out to Ohio.
Okay, all right. So he won't. Michael helps Bee Commerce bring bees into the state from. I thought he went to Georgia, but he does the Ohio trip. There's 2 times during the season. We're going to get our early packages. So if everything works out correctly, we'll have packages to install on the 26th, and we'll show you a live installation, which is a lot better than a mocked up one. And because we can get into lots of interesting trouble installing those bees, and that's how you learn. So that's it for announcements for me. We also have a, what else would we want to say? Jose, you got something else you want to add there? You're talking, but we can't hear you.
There you go.
Okay,
Trying to be courteous and
there
forget.
you go.
So no, I would encourage people to go on our website to take a look at the events page and the resources page. And in the events page, you can see our full schedule, everything that's coming up. And our webpage is www.ctbees.org. And our resources tab will, we have things on beekeeping videos, frequently asked questions, all kinds of resources. So please go on our website and check it out.
Yeah, and then while you're on the website, go take a look at, if you're a member, if you're not a member and you're here tonight, I just want to encourage you to please join. We can use your support, and then, but also it benefits you in a number of ways, because we are in the middle of amassing a fairly instructive library of videos, and you can only get at that with the membership. And when I looked at it today, I was actually amazed at the content we're beginning to accumulate there. So we have lots of, all of these bee talks are there, and then there's also a bunch of other instructional videos. There's things that we put up there just for general interest about beekeeping. So please join if you're not a member, and if you are, bask in the wealth of knowledge that we provide you on our site.
So here's the page where we've got our video library. So we've got all of the videos there. It's extensive. We got a lot of stuff going on, and ctbees.org.
All of our past bee talks are on there. I mean, all of our past guest speakers are there.
There you go. Yep.
So if you missed a guest speaker talk or something, you're looking back and you say, oh, wow, I should have gone to that one. It'll be there on our webpage. But anyway, this is for you guys. It's been an interesting mark. The bloom calendar has begun. I think some of you might have, we're going to start now, from now going forward, with every Bee Talks discussion, a little bit about our bloomscape and what's happening. And if folks are interested in putting together a bloom calendar, like I suggest you do, it's a good time to start it right now this month, because actually you are one bloom in the deficit on your you're missing one bloom, because the skunk cabbage is out. I posted a little blog. Some reason skunk cabbage just fascinates me, and always has. I remember running through the woods in the spring as a kid and knocking those plants over and smelling that skunk cabbage and just being amazed by it. But its flower is out. I also showed that same photograph of the skunk cabbage on the blog post, shows a bee coming out of it. And they actually do their part to pollinate skunk cabbage's bees when they find them and when they're accessible to bees. And then they also, the diagnostic of whether or not your bee is on skunk cabbage, usually they come back with a little yellow patch right on the top of their head. All right, so, and they have a bunch of pollen on their, in their pollen basket. Don't think they get nectar out of, I don't think any plant that smells like that is probably not producing nectar. So I don't think it produces a drop of nectar, but anyway, it's good for other things. So that's our bloom calendar. Now, next up on the bloom calendar will be silver maples, swamp maples, however you call them. But you watch that bloom. That bloom is just about, it's in bud swell right now. It is a plant that, like skunk cabbage, defies any degree day calculation. And by that, I mean that usually plants flower based on the amount of days above 30 degrees. That's the general practice for our particular degree day calculations. So that's how orchards work in the scientific way to figure out when they have to fertilize and when they have to spray insecticides and stuff like that. The agricultural colleges keep track of the degree days, and then they forecast for the farmers, even in our area here in Connecticut. And I have 2 orchards near me that use Cornell's data to figure out exactly when their plants are going to bud. And they use this sort of degree day, the warming of the earth, to try to figure out. Actually, they're very precise about when exactly that's going to happen. They get it within, days or hours. I mean, so they know exactly what they're doing for degree days. Things like skunk cabbage come up before there's even 1 degree day. So I don't have any idea how that occurs, but somehow skunk cabbages, when they go dormant in the fall, they manage to figure out exactly when in the springtime they have to come back up again. Silver maples are the same thing. We haven't had any, maybe 1 or 2 degree days, or I don't know, maybe we have 4 or 5. I haven't looked, but silver maples, I think, also are the ones that defy a sort of degree day calculation, and they come up and they bloom, I would say right about the end of maybe the end of next week they'll be out.
And Cornell University has, they collect data from various points in Connecticut too. So it's not like this is just a New York thing.
Oh, no. Yeah, no, there's, I'm sorry. Thank you so much, Jose. So a mile away from me is a Cornell weather station. So yeah, and I live in Cheshire, Connecticut, and I'm sure there's 2 or 3 around in the state of Connecticut. Any place where there's a big apple orchard, they can request, I guess, a Cornell station, and they'll put one there. It's they use Davis weather station, like I have in my yard, but I don't have a professional model. They have professional models, and they monitor them right from the location where you're at. Thank you, Jose. That's exactly.
Yeah, so it is relevant to here. Lauren, you have your hand up.
Yeah, sorry if you covered this because I was a couple minutes late, but regarding the skunk cabbage, I remember a couple of years ago, Bill, back when we were in person in Middletown.
Don't make me sad.
It makes me sad. It makes me sad. And Tom would bring all the blooms that we pass around. You talked about the skunk cabbage having this particular adaptation around heating itself.
Yes.
Which is how it, did I miss you saying that just
now?
No,
I didn't mention it.
Yeah, what's that called? I was trying to think of
endothermic.
Endothermic. Yeah, that's so cool.
Yeah, meaning inside thermal. Yeah, so skunk cabbage have this unique ability to be able to actually melt snow around them or ice and hold this. I mean, they're not, it's actually, for those of you who are interested in learn, I know you are because you have that kind of science behind you. But anyway, it's a modification of their mitochondrial DNA. So that's the sort of the engine, the energy engine inside their cells. They actually convert that from cellular functions to making heat. So it's kind of an interesting change they do, and so it's a gene that they have that makes heat. And then there's this mythology, which I love. It's poetic, and I'm sure it's not true, but I'm going to say it anyway because it's just so wonderful to hear that if bees are in that plant and they happen to get caught out there and it gets really cool, they can hang in there and stay warm all night, and in the morning just fly out and go back to their colony. And just, I know that has happened. It's been written about a lot. I don't know who observed. I don't know anybody who observed it. I know that I have seen bumblebees take off from plants early in the morning that they've overwintered on, but that's of course in the summertime. All right, what else do we have? So endothermy. That's. Oh, by the way, they're edible. If you're brave enough to want to go ahead and eat one the way it smells, but they're edible. The roots are not the roots, but some parts of the shoot are edible. All right, good. What else do we got? So let's have some bees. Let's have some questions.
Sorry, it's Lauren again. I'm really hoping that you'll spend a little bit of time talking about swarm management, when to put supers on, and I know that you've often said that we can either make bees or we can make honey.
Yes.
I keep making bees, but I want to make honey. So I would love to hear whatever you want to share about those things.
Okay, so
honey.
yeah. So the best way that I have found to make honey, and I'm forced to produce some every year for retail sales, is to make sure that I notice, especially this time of year, my strongest colonies. So I want to know that for a couple of reasons. One is I know that those are going to be, since they've overwintered and it's March and they're strong, they're likely to get the urge to swarm. And the way I manage that is to just cultivate brood from them, or take brood from them, 1 or 2 frames at a time over the next couple of months, and give that to, or the next month or so, or give that to a weaker colony. So you can, by doing that, you have to be able to have, so you have to have some resources to do that. You have to have drawn comb. You have to have another place. You have to have a place to put that brood. You don't want to just throw it out. So you have to have other colonies. Not easy to start a nuke this time of year unless you bought a queen from someplace in California or down in Georgia or something, and you have a mated queen. So that's the way I do it. So then that colony, if I've prevented or delayed the swarm tendency for that, or urge for that colony, if I've
Wait,
done that,
now? You're saying now you would take?
well, no,
them?
now I identify.
Okay,
All right, but I'm going to wait, until they're not likely to swarm, now, but all through April, I'll harvest brood out of them to try to make sure that I continually have them in the building mode rather than in the built mode, which will make them swarm. All right, so that's one way, and I think that this is the most effective way. And I've talked and been with beekeepers that have had a lot more experience at managing, not preventing. There's no such thing as preventing a swarm, but managing their colony swarm tendencies by harvesting brood. It's I think the most effective way. There's plenty of other ways you can do it. I think you've tried some where you used different methods to make splits and so on and so forth. But if
So
you
Bill,
make
let's go with that. So let's go with that idea a little bit. So you're harvesting brood in April, which is really early. You're not going to have lots of drones out there for them to make their own queens. What are folks doing when they harvest this brood?
They have to have a place, as I mentioned, you have to have a place to put it. If you can't harvest brood and throw it away, right? You have to put it into another colony. So you're trying, if you have, let's say you have even 2 colonies, they won't come through with even strength, right? So you have to plan on moving that brood out of that strong box into another one in your apiary.
how much?
It's weaker. Well, I said a couple of frames. You can take 2 frames a week. You can just make sure you're always taking brood out of it so that it doesn't have a chance to finish its initial build and then get the urge to swarm. All right, so that is one way you can delay swarming.
Can you put that frame in with just a newly purchased nuke that has a queen? I mean, would they accept that brood, and
Yes.
would they all
Yes.
kind of live happily together?
Yep. Nurse bees and foragers with gifts are always accepted in almost any colony. In my experience, and maybe somebody can know something different, but in every frame of brood that I've ever put in any box, I've never had them reject that brood or fight with the bees. Nurse bees are docile. They don't have any, they're nurse bees, and they're not ready for, the juvenile hormones are in their body are low enough to keep them from being foragers or guard bees or attack bees or soldier bees. There's lots of names for them. So they will stay. And the point is, Sylvia, that you have to put them in there with the brood. What you can't do is shake the bees off the brood and put it in the other box, because then what you've done is you've made it hard for those bees to care for that brood. Especially when you're doing it earlier in the season, you can end up with a bunch of chilled brood because you didn't give them the workers that they need to cover the brood. Now, one bee, if you want to do a calculation, one bee can cover about 3 cells, and they press their abdomen against the cell and they generate heat, and that's how they keep the colony, the brood box or the brood area at about the core temperature of the brood area at about 95 degrees or so. Those are heater bees. They're heating them. When they're brood, they're heating them. They're heater bees also, a kind of heater bee, not a winter heater bee, but a brood heating bee. So make sure you have enough nurse bees on that box, in that frame, when you put it over to cover all of that brood. Now, if you don't, you can shake some bees from another colony, that same colony that you took the brood out of. You can shake that into the box, but they will have a little battle in the colony. But for the most part, those bees will fly. The foragers that you shake into that box will fly back to their own colony. They'll scurry out of there and fly back. If you want to make sure you only have nurse bees, you can shake the frame into a plastic bucket like we use when we do testing for Varroa, and you can bounce that bucket a few times and the foragers will fly out of it. And then the rest of them are likely to be nurse bees. And that's a good way you can check for your queen too. So you're not throwing your queen in that colony. All right, so you could do it that way.
Nasli, you have a question?
Yes, thank you. Does it matter what stage the brood are in, or any brood, like at any stage of development?
Thank you. That's a great question. They've been great questions tonight. So thanks for both of those. And in that, yes, it matters. So what you're trying to actually do is take away the bees that are the brood that's aged the most. You don't want to take away the open brood, right? You want to take away cap brood and the darkest cap brood that you can find. All right, so cap brood starts off, the capping on top of a brood cell is a combination of wax and silk and some other fibers. It's porous, it's breathable. And when brood is first capped, it's a nice light tan color usually. And then it darkens as bees walk over it. They bring in detritus, and there's a little bit of propolis on that spread around on top of the caps of bees. So it turns into a nice deeper brown color, and you can tell that that brood has been capped the longest. Now, anybody want to hazard a guess at how else you could tell? Michael.
You can see emergent brood.
You can see emerging brood. Perfect. So that's one, right? So you can see brood coming out of the cells. So that's a perfect cell to bring over. And then the other one is you could, any other ones, Michael?
If you see a little spot in the middle where all the brood emerging, you got eggs just laid in there, you know the rest are gonna be out in a day or two. That's
another excellent way to do it, right? So there's an empty patch in the center of this frame. You know that frame's is what we refer to as an emerging frame cell. And then those eggs are nice to have in there too. You put them 100 eggs in there with the brood cell. And then if you don't have any of those situations and you don't know there's no brood coming out, you can always uncap a cell and take a look at the color in the center. I would suggest you do this. Because as Michael just mentioned, the queen will generally lay in the center of a frame first and move in concentric circles out to the end of the brood nest. So in the center should be the oldest pupa under those cap cells. So you just pick one out and look at the color of their eyes, right? So if it's a purple, you know that cell is ready to go, and that frame will be ready to go. All right, so.
Can I ask one more follow-up question?
Sure.
In terms of transferring brood. So what is some quick, I have to look at my notes again about signs that they're going to swarm, but what are some quick things you would look for to quickly identify, okay, this is the colony I need to start taking brood from? Like how many frames of brood, as a quick kind of calculation?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you're coming into March with 8 seams or 9 seams of bees, and when you open them, the bees are covering the entire top. Is Peter on here? Peter, if you're here, get your photo. Is he here somewhere? I didn't see.
Yeah,
him.
I'm here.
Peter,
Sorry.
get your photograph out of your, if you, would you mind? Of your boomers that you found in February.
Okay. All right.
And then,
give me-
and then
give me
share
a
that
moment.
screen. Share that screen and we'll have it. And yeah, take your time. We'll have an answer. But yeah, Sylvia, so it would be an obvious amount of bees in that colony, not a little 5 seam. When I'm saying seam, I mean, when you're looking down between the seams, between the top bars, you know, how many of those frames are filled with bees. But Peter will give you a photograph he shared with us a while back. And I think he did it in February. And you'll see what I mean by a boomer. Hopefully those colonies are still alive, Peter.
So in the meantime,
Yeah,
Howard
but-
had a question.
Okay, Howard.
Yeah, just to follow up. But so in borrowing from the booming hives, we can transfer those over to the weak hives, right?
Yes.
That's good. I did that last year.
Yeah, so there's a February colony. So I mean, you know, so that's what I would say. I would think that that's a fair amount of bees.
Wow.
And that would be the kind of colony that you would want to make sure you took some precautions about that colony swarming. And then to get back to the idea of making honey, like Lauren asked in the beginning, which I never answered. If you can keep this colony like this from swarming, you can make a lot of honey with it because it'll have a huge field force. And it's just a scientific fact that the more bees you have in a colony, assuming that they are genetically predisposed to act like normal bees, some boomers don't, I've seen them not make any honey at all, but for the most part, generally speaking, if you have colonies like this and you super them and you have prevented them or at least delayed the swarm urge until after the main flow, they'll have a sufficient foraging force and they'll make a lot of honey. Now, if you're going to ask them to draw comb in supers first before they make honey, that will change the ratio of honey you make, right? So when I sort of overlook this, but I always mean to say that drawn comb supers are your best chance of making a lot of honey, right? So there's, you know, we discussed this in our bee list, which is a sort of this closed list server that a bunch of us post on, discuss this idea of we've known this anecdotally for years that drawn comb gives signals to bees somehow or another that they have that space to put honey in. If you put some foundation on this colony, it's likely you'll have to force it into a mode when it's filled all the honey in the bottom box before it stores anything in the super. And so it's a different scenario. So my point is that drawn honey supers are your best bet if you have them. If you don't have them, you just have to sacrifice and get them drawn. Thanks,
Hi,
Peter.
Bill. Oh, hi, I'm sorry. Bill, this
Go
is
ahead.
Rebecca. How are you?
Good.
So this will be my first spring overwintering, and so far so good. And both of my hives look like Peter's picture. I have tons of bees, knock on wood, right now.
See that?
So I don't think that I'm in the position for adding more hives.
Yeah.
So if I wanted to go the route of, like Lauren said, of doing the honey, I have supers, but they're not drawn because it's going to be my first spring season
Right.
overwintering. So
Right.
will that, so I remember from school, when can I put them on approximately? But secondly, can you remind me what you said about them not wanting to cross capped honey in the brood nest too, or something to help set them up better for going up there?
Yeah.
I didn't get to experience that last year.
All
but I
right.
had
So
notes
see,
about it.
yeah, you're picking up those little tidbits that I'm throwing.
Well,
out
I had
there.
a good teacher.
So two things. One is, so your first question is, did you ask how you get your supers drawn? Is that what you asked? Did you ask
Well,
that?
mine aren't drawn because this will be my first season.
Yeah.
I have plastic, and I did get wax from what is that company in Connecticut, like New Milford?
Wing Dance Apiary. No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, the
You mean
woman, the other master
e-commerce?
keeper.
E-commerce.
Yep, I bought wax from her, and I had rolled it with wax, but I didn't get the opportunity to use anything with that last year. So that's all I have on them.
Okay, so you're ahead then, because you have them. You've rolled an extra sort of layer. That foundation already comes waxed, but you put more on.
I did.
All right, so that should give you, that should attract bees to those frames. But you're in a situation with, and this is the most difficult thing to explain to new beekeepers, and this comes with a lot of experience, but you have to you're looking for a signal from your bees. And the signal that your bees will project to you is they will indicate that they are out of space in the boxes down below by building what we refer to as frost wax on the tops of frames. And that,
Okay.
all right, so that little frost wax is the first indication that bees are ready to draw. Well, I mean, it's definite. It's the absolute sign that they're ready to draw wax, and then you can put your supers on when you see that. I suggest you put them on for when dandelions bloom anyway, because you might not be able to pick that up. But I
Okay,
say,
so when I see dandelions, that's safe
yeah,
to
you don't
put
even
on.
have to wait that long. You can super them earlier than that. But I'm telling you that they don't be discouraged if they don't build those supers out until they're ready.
Okay.
And that the indication for that is usually when there's frost wax or nice white wax, either on the shoulders of frames that are in the top deep or on the top bar or somewhere in there. That's where they'll start to indicate to you that, hey, look, we're ready. And if you don't do anything quick, we'll find another place to live, so
Okay.
you have to move on that. So that's one indication. I give people that for a diagnostic, that's the indication your bees are ready to draw wax. Now, two is you will not get them to even think of your foundation, undrawn foundation, as really nothing at all to those bees. It's not even extra space. They don't care about it. Drawn comb, they'll be attracted to it and they'll go up there immediately. And if you're running mediums, that's a good way to get them to go up there, is to put a honey frame in that medium. And then, so what I suggest folks do is, first of all, you have to understand this concept that bees build a honey shoulder in every frame. So let's get a picture of one of those. Can somebody look for a picture of a brood frame, a sort of typical brood frame that is just a, nice pattern of brood, some pollen, and then a band of honey over the top bar. And then maybe somebody can share that. If you can, I'll just keep talking about it. But anyway, so that defines for bees the top of the brood nest. So as far as bees are concerned, that's what they own for real estate. And now I'm talking about bees as if they're humans, but of course they're not. And this may not be the case for every bee colony, but for the majority of them will define their space by that honey band. They put that up there and they're not likely to walk over it to go up to foundation. So what I like to do is clear a path for them to actually get up there and start working on those not the foundation, the supers you want drawn. So you have to put your best bet is to move some frames out of the center. 2 are enough, or put frames in the center where there isn't a honey band and there's just brood or something, where bees will start to be able to walk up, right? Because you want to avoid the situation where bees are honey bound. So there's one. All right, so you're taking a look at a nice frame. And it's a classic frame, and you can see that it has brood down below. There's and then the honey band. So see, there's the honey band. And now if you have 10 of those frames on your top box, or even 9 or 8, the bees won't cross that. That's their threshold. They've decided, hey, this is the side of space we have to do. So that will prevent bees from moving up. So that's what I'm talking about, moving out of the way. It'll also sometimes prevents beekeepers that don't use queen excluders depend on that that principle to keep their queens from crossing over that honey band, and then the wood on the top bar, then the wood on the bottom bar, and start laying in their supers. But that doesn't always work out.
Anne
where
has
would
been
you-
very patient. Anne, if you want to ask your question. You're muted.
I have 2 questions, thank you.
Okay.
I've been feeding my bees dry sugar, and 2 of the hives ate it all, so I fed them again. Should I continue feeding them?
Well, do they need it?
I haven't looked at the frames to see what they have left. I've been afraid to go in.
Finally, an honest answer. I mean, I think that's the dilemma that I think most beekeepers have. They're just, they don't want to go in there and ruin stuff. They're thinking, well, but the reason I'm asking you if they need it is because there is no formula for it. It's observational. So you have to understand that in order to understand the biology you're up against, you have to always observe the conditions in the colony. So yeah, I would encourage you to get in there and take a look and see how much stores they actually have. If they still have, this is a time of year, like next week, we're going to have all 50 degrees. The bees will not be, clustered. They have perfect access to any stores that they have in the colony at that point. So, look in there. If there's plenty of honey in there at this point, then no, you don't have to feed them anymore. But if there isn't, if they're like Peter's bees and Rebecca's bees, then, and they don't have any stores, you have to feed them still, so it depends on, there's no formula for it. And again, I'm not saying that, because I want to avoid answering you, it just isn't one. You have to, your situation completely different than mine, and then, I know when I have to feed my bees by the weight of the box. I'll lift it up and figure that out. I knew what it was when they went down in October and November, and I can gauge during the year. If I want, I can go out there and just pull them up, lift them up. I lift them. I try to remember where I lifted that box up when I hefted it, which is the bee term for it. When I hefted that box in the fall, and I try to remember what it was like. I'll even write on the cover, on the side of the cover, light or heavy or lead. Now, sometimes I'll put lead on there. That means that, I couldn't lift it, so, and then I'll know when I come to the springtime, whether or not I have to, feed that box. If it's still really heavy and the bees are flying out this time of year, I won't do anything to it because it made it. This is the crossover for making it. You can also lose bees during this time of year if they're big, populous hives and they don't have any stores. You're in danger of losing them.
That's what I was afraid of.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so you're doing the what do they call that? The I don't know.
Dry sugar.
Boots and bootstraps or something. What do they call it? There's some kind of a crazy metaphor for doing too much.
Mountain camp.
What was that? No.
Mountain camp.
Yeah, no. What? No, not mountain camp.
Belts and suspenders.
Yeah, belts and suspenders. Yeah, that's it. I was looking for that. Yeah, belts and suspenders. So yeah, that's what you're doing.
So Anne, you had a second question before we go to Kirk.
Now, how early can you pull a brood from a hive? Is this, if I go in there and find that they're like Peter's, is it too soon to pull?
Well, you have to make sure you have a plan where you're going to put it.
To a weaker hive?
Yeah, no. So I wouldn't do it in March. I would wait until the end of March, early April before I
Okay.
did it. Let them build. They're fine. They'll build. And, that's a populous amount of brood, but, populous amount of bees. But you remember his bees overwintered. So today or yesterday is the actual date on the bee calendar build where your colony has its oldest bees. So they've lived the longest. A lot of the bees in your colonies are 190 days old, 150 days old. The average age of your bee at this point is the oldest that it is in the whole season. In 2 weeks from now, that changes, and the average age of your bees will be like 72. Because now, when those overwintered bees start to become nurse bees, they age out really quickly and die. So this is what they refer to as, we are right on the border, the cusp of what is discussed in the literature and among other beekeepers as the spring turnover. It's when the old winter bees die and the new brood comes online. All right, so Peter's seen a lot of bees in his colony, other people seen a lot of bees in his colony. Those bees, a good portion of them are at the end of their life. But the advantage of having a lot of them right now is that they kept the cluster warm, and they participated in nursing the bees that the queen has been laying.
My bees have been bringing a ton of pollen in
From what?
on the warm days.
From what?
I don't know.
Oh,
I
Ann,
left
you
all
come
my
on,
pro-
Ann, you can't say that. You.
I do
I'm
have
get-
skunk cabbage. I do have
Okay,
skunk
that's what I'm
cabbage.
guessing. I'm guessing it's got to be skunk cabbage. Is there plenty of around you?
There's a swamp area behind my house.
That's got to be skunk. So look for a little dot on their head.
Okay,
Next time you go out there, it's gonna be a nice day tomorrow, right? You can go out and take a look.
I'm out there.
Go
I'll
out
be
and
out
see
there.
if, go out and see if they have a little dot on their head, and that's the diagnostic for that they're rumbling around in skunk cabbage. Now, where do you live, Ann?
In
general?
West Hartford.
Oh, West Hartford. Wow. Ooh, you shouldn't have said that.
Yeah. Shh.
Shh.
I'm legal. I'm legal.
Okay, how are you legal?
I registered with the town.
And they said okay.
I'm allowed to have 2 hives.
Well, that's very good. I'm glad to hear that, because that dispels that mythology that West Hartford won't allow beekeeping.
They do allow 2,
Okay, so
but they want you to have swarm control. So I don't understand how that fits with just containing 2.
wow. Well, anyway, Jesus, why don't you invite some of those officials to bee talks?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, no, I don't know what that logic is. All right, but
All
thank you
right,
for
Kirk,
sharing.
let's go.
Yeah,
You're up. Kirk.
Sorry, just had to unmute, sorry. Hey, I just want to get back to the people that have foundation supers only and don't have comb. One of
yes.
the best things that's worked for me is feeding 1-to-1 sugar water. And the myth that they will store that in the super, I have not had that problem. You need to, once you see them drawing out, like you said, you get that really nice, pretty wax. It gets them stimulated, and 1-to-1 sugar water is a stimulus.
Yeah.
It'll
brood
help you.
also.
Yeah, it'll help you with other things too.
All right.
But it's been working great for me whenever I try to introduce new frames, because I do it constantly. I've been expanding quite a bit.
Yep.
And it will help out those new beekeepers that don't have drawn out comb.
Well, so during this time of year, you don't get a lot of honey storage anyway. So if you're, what time of the year are you doing that, feeding that out? Because that's a good stimulus for brood also.
Yeah, it is. I do it when it starts warming up. I mean, you don't want to be feeding when it's cold.
Right.
And there's a couple of methods. I know, like, people use frame feeders. I'm not a real big fan of those, but what I will do is when it warms up a little bit, I'll add an extra box on top. So you do need extra hardware, but I'll add an extra box on top. I'll put a bucket feeder on top of the inner cover,
Yeah.
and then I'll put my insulated cover on top of that. So it tries to keep the syrup somewhat warm. You don't want the cold stuff on them, but at least to get it going.
Yeah, so what I found is that with a insulated cover, you can use a top feeder for a very long time. You could use it all the way into November, and then you can use it in early spring too, as long as you have an insulated cover. Because what happens is the brood nest, which is at 95 degrees or so, is coming. There's an open space right through the center of that top feeder, and it just heats up that whole envelope, and the bees are able to get up there and take some syrup down.
Yeah, but I've had bees totally ignore that new foundation, no matter how much wax was on those things.
Yeah, I know. They don't they don't always do exactly what we want them to do. They do pretty much what they want to do, so yeah, so I'm not surprised to hear you say that. But so folks are going to try Kurt's method. I think you should. Kurt's method. I think you should do that. But you want to make certain that they don't come down. They're not storing that sugar, that 1-to-1 syrup in their colony. So if they are, they're likely to move that up later on. Now, I think that anytime you put 1-to-1 stimulus food or anything like that inside of a colony, you will get a certain amount of that sucrose back into your honey. Now, I know that 50% of the samples that were presented at APA Monday for quality and clarity and taste and all of that were sent. All of those 1,000 samples were sent to Germany to some lab where 50% of them came back with a certain amount of sucrose in them. So, but and that might be the case with mine too. But my honey tastes great. So I don't know if there's a little bit of sucrose in it. There will be a little sucrose in it naturally, but you want to make sure that if you do you're not storing honey in cells that are filled with syrup. That's all, because you're not making honey.
That's because your honey's artisanal.
That's because what?
Your
I didn't hear that.
Lauren, your audio is off. We're not hearing you. Well, Bill, just one thing.
Oh,
before
I
we
know
go-
what she said. She said that's because my honey is artisanal.
Oh,
That's
artisanal.
right. That's right. It's because my honey's artisanal. I forgot about that. Absolutely, Lauren. That's exactly right. My honey's artisanal. You shouldn't forget that. I mean, that's a.
So,
Go ahead.
Bill, what are the bees telling? Before we go to Graham, what are the bees telling us when we see sugar grains at their entrance?
They're taking it out because they think it's just a foreign material, or it's fallen down from where you fed it to the landing board and on the bottom board, and then they're cleaning it out. So either one of them, they just you will see that discarded material not only from sugar cakes, but you'll see it also from the paper on pollen patties if you happen to feed them. And there's lots of discarded materials. Sometimes a pollen patty is unacceptable to bees and they just discard most of it. So folks that have studied that do it by weight. They try to figure out how much weight is missing from that pollen patty and did it get anywhere in the colony, and do they, then they discard it. So yeah. So lots of times both sugar and pollen patties will be discarded.
Great. So Graham, you're next, and then we go to Sylvia.
Okay. So I started after 2 failures. Last year I started with just 1 hive. And this year I plan to expand, but at the moment I've got 1 hive. It's not a boomer like that picture you shared, but I did insulate it, and it's pretty well covered on the top, and there are a lot of bees. So I'm anticipating I'm going to need swarm management. I don't have any place to harvest brood and put them, so I figured I'm going to have to make a split. I'm planning on, well, I have arranged to get a nuke from my mentor. So how do I know? You said you got to listen to the bees. How do I know when is the right time to make a split? Or is a split really the best thing for me to be doing?
Well, it's hard to tell without knowing the history of your colony or how you're going to manage the thing, if whether or not it's the best thing to do. It is one thing you can do. You know, you can make a split if you observe that that colony is, or you think it might be swarming. It's like, I don't know how many frames it came. Do you know how many seams of bees it came through with in the spring here?
No, there's this, I'll give you an honest answer. I've been afraid to open it up and look inside.
Yeah. Now, I already knew that, but but anyway, yeah. So without any of that information, you really can't tell. So you're going to have to actually dig in there and see what you have going on. Like, it might look like it has a lot of bees in it. When you get inside, you're going to find out you have 2 frames of brood. You can let that one run right now. Right now, you could have 3, maybe even 4 frames where there's a queen laying on them. Because you got to remember, we're March, April, we're very close to, some decent flows. So bees have been working at building population up if they're healthy. They've been working at bee population up. So so yours is an example of why you shouldn't have one hive, because really you're left with this dilemma. So if you're going to split that colony, the only way you can split it early enough to prevent those bees from swarming, if that's what your goal is going to be, then you're going to have to get a mated queen for them. And you can probably get a mated queen by the end of March from somebody.
Okay, so I should not be planning on them making their own queen.
No,
Not
you're going
this
to be, you're going to be, that'll take too long. That you have to wait at that point until the drones are flying, which will be like the middle of, Michael, when do your drones start flying?
I was gonna say, if you got the equipment, I would say go for it, because you never know.
Well, I mean, there's no drones out right now. I'm talking about, when do you see them
Oh,
flying?
yeah, but in another week or 2, I wouldn't be surprised if we got drones.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. So I would say, I would wait until the end of March.
Yeah, I mean, how well is she going to be mated with?
Well,
with
maybe
drones
not
at
very
this
well,
time
but
of year, you know?
I'd
Yeah.
say, I'd say that in my opinion, you have to wait a little bit longer. So I think you're safer getting a mated queen. If you want to try mating out a queen on a walkaway split, that would be difficult to do, I think, in April. It's doable, but I don't think it's the best route if you want to get a good healthy mated queen.
Thank you.
Swarm season starts April 15th, so.
Yeah, I
we could
know, but
push it ahead a week or 2
yeah, we don't see them around here. It starts in April, yeah, but I mean, we're peaking out somewhere in May. Wouldn't you agree to that, Michael?
Oh yeah, May's a definite swarm season, but
Yeah,
you got to push it a little bit.
you could. I mean, so, Michael's bringing up the option of trying it and see what you get. Now, what you'll be able to tell is if you go for an early natural mating, then you'd have to pick frames out of that colony with eggs. I would notch those frames under certain larvae, eggs and first instar larvae. I would notch them with my hive tool. So look up notching, and that's how you can encourage bees to actually draw cells, queen cells, where you want them, because you'd be making that nuke queenless at that point. Because I wouldn't risk making my mother colony queenless at that point and bringing the mated queen over into my nuke. You could do it that way, but I would hesitate to do it only because it's so early. Try to get them to draw out queen cells and get a queen mated and try. You learn a lot about the biology if you try that.
Okay, Sylvia, you're on.
So, yeah, so at this point, given how our temperatures are, I still have a cozy around my hive. I have a quilt box in candy bar. Should I start dismantling them? Or is it still, I mean, I'm in Northwest Connecticut, so I'm like anywhere between 5 to 10 degrees colder than a lot of you elsewhere in the state.
Yeah, so insulation in any form has no effect on the colony, a detrimental effect ever. So insulation is like having insulation in your walls in your house. It never has a negative consequence for you. It always is a consistent resistance to the flow of energy. So you can take it off or leave it on. You can. I run my insulated tops all summer because the tops of the colonies get really hot, and it provides a resistive barrier to the gain of solar heat in my colonies during the summer. And then in the winter, I use, of course, I want to try to conserve some of the natural heat the colony's making. But so there's really no date for that. It doesn't really matter.
So similar to a lot of the other newbies, I've been challenged on trying to actually go in and do an actual inspection. And one of the reasons is because the cozy is wrapped around two deeps. And so it just seems kind of disruptive, and I'm not ready to get them worked up, getting cold air and then trying to fuss around with insulation and trying to take it off and get the hives out and doing the whole inspection. But am I better off then? I mean, it's kind of a weighing the timing and everything. And I'm better off waiting another week or two till we know we're getting kind of warmer weather than just taking the insulation off and then doing my full inspection.
Yeah, you can do it that way. Yeah, there's no problem with that. You don't have to get into your colonies in early March. You can wait and a day or two, but
you say that, but then you're telling us that it might swarm. So I don't know what I'm doing.
Did I contradict myself?
I don't know. I'm afraid of waiting
because I'm all
gone, and then you're gonna see me hang off a 10-foot, hang on to some tree trying to get my bees. So I'm really scared. But okay.
No. It's so what I'd like. So take away a lesson maybe. So this is a hobby that you've hopefully all 92 of you that are on this Bee Talks have taken on for some kind of enjoyment. In addition, maybe some of you were here for productive reasons or whatever. But it's not. Don't be afraid. Try not to be afraid. Your bees will tolerate a lot of your ignorance, and then when you get really stupid with them, they'll kind of correct you. So just make sure that so you can go a long way. And still,
but I've just announced to 90-something people that I've been able to get through the winter. So it'll be really embarrassing if they all disappear because they're up in 2 trees or something. And then I have nothing to show, and I can't even prove my flow hive works. So
I know.
It will be a public embarrassment. So that's why.
It'll be a public embarrassment because if I ever get a hold of those photographs of you trying to climb in that tree, I will post them on our website, send them to 700 people. So, we have 700 members in our club at this point. So
all right, David, you're next.
What else we got? Yeah.
David, unmute yourself and ask your question.
Okay, I have a couple questions. This year, finally, they overwintered. It seems like they're all doing well. When do I start treating them for mites with oxalic acid, or what should I be using?
Well, you have to, again, there's no prescription about that, but if I were you, I would put a drop board under them now and try to get an assessment of what your natural mite fall is. And then you can go from there. So that's the best thing to do this time of year. Put in, instead of getting in there and trying to do mite rolls and all of that, you'd be in Sylvia's backyard then, like trying to do all of that stuff and being scared. So just put a drop board under there and get a mite count. So I'm going to suspect that your mite count is going to be fairly low this time of year because the mites have not had an opportunity to do much in as far as reproduction is concerned, because hasn't been a lot of brood right now. The mite population is trying to catch the brood. The brood is outrunning, the queen is outlaying the mite reproductive cycle. Now, what'll happen is some time in June, they'll cross and the mite population will be much higher than the brood population. But right now, the mites are trying to catch up to the brood. So they have plenty of opportunities to reproduce because there's lots of brood around being kept. So you're gonna, so you won't see those mites on the drop board is my point. And so then I would, but I would still want to know what my drop is. So, I mean, if you're looking at 15 or 20 mites on that drop board in a 3-day, in a 72-hour drop, then you can anticipate that you have a real high mite count in there. And then you have to decide what kind of treatment you want to use. You want to go organic acid or thymol or something like that. But all of those treatments, except for at this point, oxalic acid, are the temperature, the minimum temperatures are too high for the environmental temperature. Right?
Okay.
So you have to be very careful. The only option you would have right now is oxalic acid, but you still, I'm not an advocate of treating mites, proactively treating in every instance. I do have a theory about scheduling treatments that folks might find is a better idea, but I haven't fully fleshed that out because it's a confusing argument. Yeah,
Okay.
but anyway,
So I have not opened mine up yet, but I have a nuke that I started in probably July, August, and it's made it through the winter as of right now. And mostly through the winter, every time I went in there to make sure they had
food,
the sugar board that I put up there, the bees have always been up on top.
yeah.
Is that normal?
Well,
Or do I have to
again,
worry?
so my bees all winter on top, and
Do I have to worry about the stores on the bottom that
you don't have to worry. You don't have
that
to
they're-
worry about anything. They're wintering on top probably. Did you have an insulated top on?
Yes, I did.
All right, so that's why they have a tendency to winter higher in the box if the top cover is insulated, because that's where the warmth is.
Yeah.
Colony builds up a heat dome, and that under that heat dome, bees like it, so they stay up there, and they go down, and when they get a chance to break cluster, they go down and get food. So yeah, there's no problem with them. You don't have to worry about anything. You just have to make sure now that nuke is flying, right? When you're on the nice
Yes,
days.
yes, it is.
Now, what kind of a population do you see flying? You see, like
Not
few
many,
bee-
not many yet.
Well, but like, is it 2 bees or 10?
Very, very few. I haven't counted them yet, but there's very few.
No, I'm saying flying in and out of the box.
Probably like five or 10. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a pretty good sign, in my opinion, about nuke this time of
Okay.
year. Yeah, so I have a top bar hive that survived, a little top bar hive nuke that survived also in a part of my yard that's shady, and the entrance is facing it the wrong way, and it's cold over there, and but they survived, and they're flying this about the same way, about 10 or 15 bees at a time come out. That's it.
Okay, and then what's the idea of, I haven't opened them yet, of course, but if the bottom box is low on food source and the upper is loaded, do you flip flop the boxes?
No, I don't. That's called reversing. I don't do that.
Okay.
You can if you want to. That bottom box is likely to be empty.
Yep.
If it's a double deep, that bottom box is likely to be empty at this point. Very few colonies that I've ever had left a significant amount of stores in the bottom box. Usually, if I find stores in the bottom box, I'm looking through a dead hive, not a live one, because usually they eat everything in that bottom box and then they move up into the next box up.
Because I fed like crazy in the fall.
Okay, so they had a lot of stores in the top box, and maybe they had some stores in the bottom box. Who knows? So you'll have to see.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Hasley, unmute yourself and ask your question.
Thank you. Again, going back to the feeding with the sugar syrup, doesn't it stimulate them drawing comb?
Yes, that was the point.
Okay. Oh yeah. But so like, at what point do you start to be concerned about it interfering with the honey?
right away, in my opinion.
Right away after they've drawn the comb, or?
No, well, after they've drawn the comb, you're fine. You got drawn comb. What I'm suggesting is that you don't feed at any time when you're trying to make honey. So you have to get so what Kirk is explaining is he uses that technique. I like that technique in the fall better than I like it in the spring. But what he's saying is that it's a stimulus for them to build wax, and he's gotten his supers drawn and early or drawn successfusly.
Bill, I only get like a frame or two drawn, then I let them, then I take it off. I don't
Okay,
leave
so
it on.
that's a good he's metered, he's sort of backed off on that, and I mean metered out his technique, and so that's great. Yeah, he gets.
So he does it in the fall in
No,
anticipation.
no, he does it in the
needing-
spring,
Oh,
right, Kirk? I'm gonna put words in your mouth. You do it in the
Yes,
spring.
I do it. I do it in the spring. I was just trying to see if I was muted. Yeah, I do it in the springtime, especially if I'm trying to put brand new supers on. And I get a frame or two drawn out, and they're not fully drawn out. It just getting the
They're
bees
starting-
to draw some
yeah.
wax.
Yep.
And once they start, then the train goes.
They keep doing it. Yeah,
But getting them started is the hardest part.
yeah.
okay. And then in the spring, there's presumably a lot of nectar around, so they'll have enough material to build a wax.
Right. That's exactly right. Yeah. Once the natural flow occurs, but so there's two things that bees need to build wax. They need a source of energy. Either it's that one-to-one that Kirk is talking about, or they need a natural flow, enough nectar to build wax. They don't need a whole gangbuster flow, but they need enough nectar coming in. Then they need a warm condition. So they can't really draw wax and carry wax up from their, wax glands and onto their mandibles and all of that. And then they masticate them a little bit, and then they mix some saliva with it and then sort of form it into cells. They can't do that when it's too cold. They have to have enough bees up there and enough strength around them to start drawing wax. But as Kirk is saying, once they begin, they go like gangbusters, but getting them started is the hard part.
And I'm also trying to do single brood boxes. I don't want them filling those up with nectar. And they will do that. And once they fill those with nectar, then they'll work up. But I want the single brood box to have brood, not nectar.
All right, so that's a different
another subject, right?
that's another subject, but it's a worthy one. We won't take it on here, Kirk, but you keep it in mind, and we'll let you present a little bit about that next Bee Talks, because it's an emerging trend, and it's the way people make lots of honey, because bees will store a lot more honey from a single box with a queen excluder and then supers on top of that, then they will sometimes with a double deep, where they'll spend a lot of their time storing honey and nectar around in the confines of the two deeps before they get started on the supers. The thing is, with a single, there's no room for them to store honey, so they have to look for some place to do that. And if you have drawn comb and a single box and a queen excluder, you'll get lots of honey production. That's the way folks are producing honey these days in singles. But you got to watch out for swarms, because they're out of space down there, because they only have one brood box, and it's all a queen needs is 8 frames, and she can't outlay 8 frames before she can get back to frame 1. The first frame she laid in is all emerged, so she has that. Before she can get back to frame 1, all the bees have emerged from it.
Okay, so unmute yourself and ask your question, and Helen's next.
Thank you. My bees are actually up in Maine, and I actually watched you talk, Bill, on the Maine State Beekeepers Talk this winter, so it was kind of fun to see you there. But I'm a member of both, because I actually learn a lot more down here, because it's very much on your own up there. They said, get your people to do it. I'm like, I am the people. This was my whole mission I just started last summer. My whole mission was just to at least have one hive survive. I have one going. The other one, I'm quite sure is dead, and have a caretaker who doesn't know what he's doing either. We're both such novices. I was just texting him and he said that we have a little bit of action on the one hive that's still alive, but I'm not going to be able to get up there probably realistically for about a month. We keep the other one, we're giving a live hive, the sugar bricks as it empties out, but I'm worried about this empty dead hive. Should I take the frames out or have David take the frames out and put them in a refrigerator or a freezer, or what do I do because when I get up there to start preparing them, because I'm going to buy a package, but the package wouldn't probably come up till May, right? So, but I don't want to get beetles or bad things in the dead hive.
Well, what you'll get is mold and rotted bees. So he has to clean that out right now. As a matter of fact, what I like to do is clean out dead outs as they occur in my yard in the wintertime. I don't wait until spring. I try to get the bees out of there when they're still cold. That way they don't get a chance to rot. When a colony dies, if it has a significant amount of bees in it, 10,000 even, they're about 80% moisture. That moisture then permeates the inside of the hive body, stays there, is trapped on the comb and stuff. Sometimes it dries out, but for the most part, it grows mold. You got bees' bodies are wonderful places for mold spores to grow, dead bees' bodies, and they've got moisture and honey. So yeah, so get up there and have your other new beekeeper get in there and clean out all of the frames, shake all the bees out of the colony, and make sure that they're all clean. And then if you have access to a freezer, absolutely freeze them.
Because I was going to say, I said, just put and I can fit, I guess, 8 or 16 frames into a freezer. If worst case, could I keep them in the refrigerator, the ones that I can't freeze?
Yeah, you can put them in a refrigerator. Also, won't do any good for them, but it'll keep them from getting rotted, I think.
Okay.
But, I never put frames in a refrigerator. I'm sure some people do. But yeah, you don't have to freeze them forever. You could freeze them for 72 hours and then put them in the refrigerator and they'd be fine.
Okay, so I could do, okay, great.
You could do a switch like that. You can make sure that you put them in, whatever you put them in the freezer, keep them in that. So don't take them out. Freeze them in whatever it is, black plastic bag.
Okay.
Some kind of a cover. Lauren has these wonderful comb storage bins that she bought from some bee supply house. So you can buy those. They're specialized units to store frames in. But I would just say, put them in a black plastic bag, freeze them in that. Don't take them out, and then put them in your refrigerator.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a few more questions before our hour is up soon. So Helen, go, and Carol's next.
Okay, I have a question about a dead out. I was cleaning the dead out and I have frames of nectar and honey that are actually uncapped, some of the frames. So I was surprised to see that. I wondered if those frames could be fed to a new package if they're uncapped. And I wondered if I fed them too late and that's why they were uncapped.
All right, so you being surprised by the uncapped honey is only because you anticipated something about bees that's not quite true. So in the fall especially, bees don't cap everything in their colony. They don't have the time for that. All right, so it could be perfectly good honey and it's just not capped. When I was taking a fall crop off my colonies, I don't do that anymore, but when I would see that all the time on the frames that I was harvesting frames from knotweed and goldenrod. And you'd see it all the time. The frame, if you look at it, it almost bulges a little bit. The nectar inside, the honey that's in those frames, it has a look about it. It looks shinier. You take a toothpick and put that on a refractometer and it'll run in the 19% range.
Okay, I shook it and
honey.
It didn't come out. It was thick. Yeah. And it didn't look like they had uncapped it.
No, that's perfectly okay to feed them back.
Okay, so I will do that. My second question was, I always thought that I was supposed to feed sugar water to a new package. If I put these frames of honey in, do I need to feed them as well? I will be putting some foundation in, but I do have drawn comb that I would be putting with a new package.
Yeah, so if you give them some drawn comb, and it depends on how much honey you have.
I have quite a bit, actually.
And then if we're quite a bit, I don't feed
Okay.
package.
All right. And they should then, just like we were talking about,
they
then
will
they should
use
be
that.
able to draw out the comb without any sugar water.
Well, so let's back up and make sure that everybody understands that what Kirk was explaining. We're talking about stimulus for wax. That's it's not a necessary thing to do. It's an option way to get stuff to do. So it's not. Yeah. So no, if I had 4 or 5 frames of honey, 4 frames of honey even, I don't feed those packages.
Okay, that sounds great.
Then I put drawn comb in them and dump a package in that, and you're good to go. That colony doesn't need to be
Okay, sounds great. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay, Carol and then Barbara.
That was Carol.
No.
Oh.
Carol,
you should have put your mouse guard on. Your mouse is talking.
No, Carol. Carol, your audio is terrible. No, we cannot understand what you're saying.
We're sorry about that.
Carol, maybe if you could type your question in the chat, I can read it and Bill can answer it because you're.
No, we really can't hear you, Carol. You can keep talking, but it's like you're going through a little mouse translator. So okay, great. Now we can.
Let's go to Barbara.
This is
Barbara,
much
you can
better.
unmute your microphone and ask your question. In the meantime, we ask Carol to type her question in the chat and I'll ask it.
Okay, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
So Bill, my sister and I have 3 colonies, and last Monday we opened them up to take a look, and each one has a queen. We found the queens. They're bringing in pollen, but my colony is not terribly populated. There aren't a whole lot of bees, and in 2 of the 3 we saw no brood. So I'm wondering if I should be worried.
Well, kind of. I'd be a little worried because you should see some brood. Are you sure you said you saw a queen in every colony?
Yes.
And then, but one of them does have brood.
One of them has brood, but the other 2, we saw no brood.
But you saw pollen coming into all 3 colonies.
Yes. Yep.
Did you see eggs in all 3 colonies?
Never see eggs. We have a hard time finding eggs.
Aha!
Ever. So we did not see eggs, but we're not very good at finding eggs.
So you have to get better at finding eggs, and your eyesight's not the problem. Your technique might be the problem. So you have to make sure when you're looking for eggs that you have the sun at your back. So don't try to do it at a cloudy day especially if you're having trouble. You have to have sun that you can shine in.
Okay.
Right, into the cells. So
Yep.
you want the sun over your back, and you know that technique, Barbara?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So that's the technique you should always use. But then what I suggest you do is use your Hive tool and prop up a frame, especially in the center of the brood nest. Take a photograph of it with your phone and then expand that photograph, see if you can see eggs. But make sure you pay attention to the angle of the cells so that you're not excluding the possibility of even seeing eggs with your photograph. Your photograph has to be one that will work to see the bottoms of the cells.
Like straight down into the cells.
Straight down into, well, kind of at that angle.
Yeah.
So that you can see them. I'm sure you're going to see eggs in there. If not, then you have two queens that didn't come through the winter and are viable. The way you can test that is you have that queen, that one colony that's queen right there, you saw brood in.
Yes.
So what I would do then, I would go back to that colony and I would, well, let me see, let me take that back. Look for eggs first and then get back to us.
Okay. But if the bees are bringing in pollen, doesn't that imply that there's brood in those colonies?
That's the lure. That's the beekeeping lure about that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
That would be, that they're either preparing a brood nest, or they or there's that, but the fact that the colonies are queen right.
Yeah.
Could also, now you're at the stage where you don't have any supers on these colonies.
No. No.
Well, then I would suggest that to test whether or not you can stimulate some brood in either of those colonies, put some liquid feed on them 1-to-1.
Okay.
And see if you can get them, even if you have to put a baggie on top of the frames, if you don't have a feeder, investigate some way to do that, and then put a little bit on there, see if you can stimulate brood.
Okay. All right.
Okay,
Thank
so
you.
I've got Carol's question in the chat. I treated for mites on February 12th, and again on March 6th with oxalic acid vaporization, because she found mites. I found mites on my monitoring board. I pull the monitoring board every week or so. What should my treatment strategy be when I have capped brood? Then she writes Formic Pro.
Well, she wrote the question and answered it. So that's the answer to it. When you have capped brood, no matter what people tell you, and there are going to be a lot of people that tell you, you can use a formic acid, an oxalic acid vaporization in intervals. Some people say 5 days, some say 7, some say once a week, every 3 days, but science studies, controlled studies, random studies have shown that kind of sequence of oxalic acid is more likely to be ineffective than it is to be effective. So with brood, because lots of Varroa will be under caps, with brood, oxalic acid vaporization is not that effective. The only time it's effective is without brood. That when you can guarantee its efficacy, let's put it that way. So then you have to find, your next step would be to find, well, first you have to discover whether or not your treatment was efficacious. So so in that case, when you did that vaporization in February, does it slow the mite drop? Did you get an accelerated drop, meaning that there was a lot of phoretic mites on the bees that it killed and dropped to the drop board? So that's one thing you have to check and see if what you're doing is actually effective. And then if that's the case, give it a couple of weeks and see if that mite drop on the board lessens a little bit. And then you have to go over to a strategy of a more temperature appropriate miticide, which is either formic acid or some other thing. But so that's it.
No, Carol, that's still not working.
I guess she doesn't get it.
You're taking the earbuds out. Don't use the earbuds. Go
use the
directly
mic
to
on the
computer mic.
Yeah, use the mic
Unplug
on the
it.
computer.
Yeah, unplug those. Oh, there isn't one.
Rip them out of your ears. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
You know,
It's getting late, and if you see, sometimes your mice, if you treat your mice terribly in your yard, they get back at you when you're trying to speak on bee talks. That happens more often than you think.
she keeps talking. I'm not sure what.
I know she's getting this. So it's getting late here. It's
Well, we have Nasli with another question. I think we have a limit on number of questions here.
No, she can ask.
Sorry.
more.
Sorry,
No,
I
go
get
ahead.
going in the, I
And
get
we
going in the
thought
spring.
Sylvia was bad, but oh my God.
Wow, we have.
Sorry. You're so kind. Okay, last question, otherwise you're gonna hang up on me. So it sounds like you're just like against feeding in general. What about pollen patties to stimulate, because they need that for the babies in the spring?
All right, so your characterization of me being against feeding is unfair now. I'm not against feeding. I'm against feeding when it's not necessary. All right. And I do try to minimize the amount of sucrose or raw sugar I give any of my colonies, because I want to try to keep them feeding themselves. And I think an art of beekeeping is to try to figure out how you manage your colonies so you don't have to feed. Now, when you have to get equipment functional so you can make honey, then that's a different story. Then there are methods that you can do that. And you can actually, as I mentioned to the last folks that were on this, the sister beekeepers, that they could use one-to-one syrup to see if they can stimulate brood rearing in those colonies. Your suggestion that they need pollen patties for baby bees in the spring is wrong. So they don't need pollen patties, they need pollen. And they'll have a source of pollen very soon. I don't think in Connecticut it's necessary to feed pollen patties. Whenever fresh pollen is coming in, your bees are not using their pollen patties. They don't care about them.
So when do you need to feed sugar syrup and or pollen patties? When do you think it's necessary?
When it's needed. So in other words,
so how would you know? How would you know when it's needed?
I'll tell you. So if what you try to do in the springtime, especially when you're examining your brood at this point, and this is a fair and good question, and hopefully this makes sense. You have to look for the second instar larva in your frames. So that's where you can tell. So you can see eggs in the spring. You'll see first instar larva. There won't be a lot of royal jelly around that first instar larva. The second instar larva is where the bees really ramp up their feeding. So what you want is that second instar larva. Do you understand what I'm talking about? Does everybody understand what I'm talking about? All right, so you don't understand what I'm talking about because it's too late to actually get into it, I think. But let me see if I could find photographs of it. Somebody find a photograph of second instar larva and put it up and share it. And we can end the evening with that. So the larva goes through 5 stages. It goes through, it's an egg first, then it goes to the first larval stage, the second larval stage, third, fourth, and fifth. All right, so there's 5 stages of growth that are visible to you as a beekeeper. And in each one of those stages, the larva gets bigger and bigger. So you back off from the biggest larva you can see, and you keep going down, find smaller and smaller larvae, and you will identify every stage of larva in your colony. The second stage is egg, first stage larva, second stage larva. That's the second instar. That's what it's called, in entomology. That has to have a big well of brood food around it. If that doesn't have a big well of brood food around it, then what's happening is your queen is laying, the bees are starting off well, but the nurse bees don't have enough food sources to feed that larva. It is uncommon. Let me make sure I emphasize it, uncommon in Connecticut to run into that situation. Under those circumstances, I'd say then you have to feed a pollen patty, right, to get them, try to stimulate. Which one you would feed them, I have no idea, because I'm confused about the subject just like everybody else is. Some patties, people get wonderful results with, some they just throw out of the colony. Read Randy Oliver's Scientific American article on the research. He's found research, he's done research. He just recently published a paper he co-authored with a couple of scientists, and he's done an incredible amount of research on this subject. So you can read his articles about pollen patties. Just Randy Oliver pollen patties, search that, and you can read all of his work. And he'll show you in that work, which ones bees, which pollen patties bees will accept best. But remember, those are under the dry conditions of the California in the Valley. So it's like not the same as Connecticut. In Connecticut, and he's the first one to say, by the way, even after all the research he's done on feeding pollen substitutes and pollen, artificial pollen, that if bees are bringing in natural pollen, it's probably a waste of your time because they won't use it, right? So as soon as you see bees bringing in natural pollen, so that's when you would feed liquid syrup. I would do that if I was going to do that, if I had a weak flow, I'd feed in the fall. So I'd feed syrup. There was an occasion this year to feed in the fall, in my opinion, and I did. Every one of my
So you
colleagues.
feed syrup when the second instar larva doesn't have food around it.
Not syrup. That would be pollen patties.
So when do you feed syrup?
Okay. So as I mentioned, you can feed syrup when bees don't have, you got populations of bees like in the fall, right? When you have populations of bees and you have a drought or a weak goldenrod flow or something's occurring in the fall that's preventing them from being able to put up winter stores, then I would feed them.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and when you get when you're starting up a new hive, you have to feed
Oh
them
yeah,
too,
when
right?
you're starting
Yeah.
a new package of bees, you have to. Yeah, you have
Oh,
to.
okay. Okay, so mainly the fall and when you're starting a new package. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's a little bit more complicated than that, and because there's no prescription, you have to learn from the bees when that occurs, and it's a difficult thing for new beekeepers to understand, or any beekeeper actually to understand, is that the biology in the colony is always dependent on the ecosphere, what's occurring in the bloom scape of the area where your bees survive. So I'll leave you with that thought. Be an observational beekeeper, not a prescriptive one, because the prescription piece is not likely to work that much. All right, so, but the observation piece will work all the time. Well, listen, this has been wonderful. I appreciate, and Jose has been keeping us on tasks. Thank you very much. We hope to see you here next month. Carol, get your mic, your mouse mic thing all fixed, because it was a lot of fun, but there's people that have ear problems now from that, so. All right, so listen, thank you again. I think we introduced what we would like you to do in terms of our website. We have a speaker at the end of the month, and I suggest you register for that. And
the workshop.
And the workshop at the end of the month, right? So we'll be at Massaro Farm. That'll be our opening introduction to Massaro Farm in person.
In person.
No masks required. Right, Paul?
That's right.
No masks required. All right. See you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you. Thank you, Jose.
Thank you, guys.